Growing up a Game Boy kid, I was a little late to the Dragon Quest rodeo. My first actual dive into the series was Dragon Quest Monsters. This may seem a little backward as an entry point, but considering how pocket monstering was really taking the world by storm in the 90s, it makes sense why a young kid like me would be drawn to a new creature collectathon. It wasn't until Dragon Quest III release for the Game Boy Color, that's Dragon Warrior 3 if you're nasty, that I truly fell in love with this series. I don't want to spend an obscene amount of time gushing about the Dragon Quest series, mainly because I just did a full podcast episode about why I love it. But trust me when I say, the series is great. When Square Enix was like, Dragon Quest III Remaster has entered the chat, I came to the conclusion that I was very excited. This HD 2D kick that Square Enix is on is mwah! The Final Fantasy games are gorgeous. The gameplay, however, some of these games are a little too classic in terms of mechanics. Several have already been re-released with better design that keeps them fresh. The big question on every Dragon Quest fan's mind is Square Enix gonna do the same thing to the Dragon Quest series that it did to these Final Fantasy games? I hope not. This is their chance to spice things up, and it's not like they need to look too far for inspiration. Dragon Quest III need only borrow from the other games in the series and all of the great things that they included. So to make this as brief as possible, here are 5 things that I'd love to see in Dragon Quest III Pixel Remaster, and all from the other games. You know how in Dragon Quest VI your team is super boring and you can replace this personality deficient roster with friendly monster characters? I want to be able to do that in Dragon Quest III. One of the many reasons Dragon Quest is iconic is because of these critters. You know how you always find that one monster on your adventure that's like, I'm not a regular monster, I'm a cool monster. I want to yeet the Dragon Quest equivalent of a Pokeball at its face. How adorable would it be if you could snag a blue slime or a Draki to jump in your party? Dragon Quest V let you collect a lot of monsters, but I really like how 6 did it because of how curated the list was. Instead of being able to collect everything you see, you could collect a handful of slimes and a Haxorus. 3 Remaster would benefit from this by adding some more variety to your roster. How exciting would it be to be on your second run through the game to completely forgo creating human characters and instead rolling up with your own squad of monsters and being like, who's the bitch now, Zoma?
Who's the bitch now?
Did you know that this was also the first game to include a class system in the Dragon Quest series? At the time, it was pretty innovative. Change a class, keep half your stats and any spells you picked up. Also, each character had a personality trait that directly tied to their stat growths, kind of like what you'd see in Pokemon. This was good back in the 90s, my dudes, but it's 2023. We want to better diversify our characters. There's no better way to do that than with a skill tree. It's one of the many reasons that Dragon Quest XI was so successful. People can have completely different experiences with the characters, like Jade, spears or claws, Sylvando, whips or swords, or Eric. Well, not Eric because boomerangs were OP. But for Dragon Quest III, what if I want to build a crit monk as opposed to one that is speedier or one that hits hard consistently? What if I want a wizard who dishes out more ice damage than fire? Or a priest who can actually hit with thwack? Modern games are so much more successful when they give players room for building their own characters. We like skill trees. It worked for Final Fantasy X, it worked for Dragon Quest XI, it'll work for you. Along the same lines as skill trees, some of the classes in OG Dragon Quest III didn't do very much. Warriors tanked, martial artists crit, thieves sometimes stole things, and jesters pulled down their pants in the middle of battle. Beyond this, melee classes really didn't contribute to diversity, especially when it came time to change classes. I think this is where including the attack abilities of Dragon Quest VII could really help this game shine. 7's class system gave every class moves that they could use in both in and out of battle that are staples in both the side games and the main entries. They added a lot of usefulness to these melee classes that went beyond just spamming attack over and over again. Hell, warriors in the original couldn't even use Dragon Slash. It'll also add a lot of long-term usefulness to some of these obsolete classes, possibly making you want to use them at endgame. Imagine thieves using Divide like Eric, or jesters using Hustle Dance like Sylvando, or merchants merchanting. This needs to happen. Now. A lot of people may argue that one of the greatest things about Dragon Quest IX was the fact that you could play online with your friends and fight monsters, and honestly, I don't think Dragon Quest IX was that great, but one thing I think it did really well, which I think should appear in every RPG ever, is that gear equipped on your character appears on the character model. Cosmetic features in games are fun and add so much personal expression to your characters, especially in games like this where your party is made up of a bunch of expressionless boobs. You want to walk into the final boss's dungeon with a pot on your head? Good for you. Make a soup of his bones while you're at it. Inclusions like this might be less meaningful at the beginning of an adventure when your equipment is more mismatched, but when you get to endgame and are toting a full suit of Metal King armor, that slaps. Oh, and while you're at it, throw in some character skins from the other game. I want my Jester to look like Sylvando. Bring back the goddamn PACHISI track board game. You robbed it from the iOS version for no reason. This is where I want to spend my time while playing this game. Hours and hours on this beautiful board game. Reset after reset until I get all the fucking mini medals and treasures, tearing my hair out every time I land on a trapdoor. This was the best addition to the Game Boy Color version, and you took it out of future releases. Using a board game as a mini game in an RPG is genius, and whoever thought of it deserves a raise. If you guys remove this from this entry, I want you to know that I have skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you keep PACHISI in there, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will cast Kathwak on you. And there you have it. The top 5 things that will never happen, but I'd still love to see them in Dragon Quest III Pixel Remaster. Are you excited for this game to come out? What are some things that you would love to see from the Dragon Quest franchise in this remaster? What kinds of things are missing? I'd love to hear from you.